Hi, welcome to my show. Today my guests are Michael Dwyer and Sonya Julie. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi.
And anybody that knows me knows that these two are my friends, as well as they are writers. And Michael is the founder of the Rochester Writers Conference, which I've had the pleasure of being a speaker on the very first one.
That's right, back in 2008.
Wow, yes, in 2008. And I am very happy. Thank you for inviting me again this year. I will be one of the several wonderful speakers that you have, which we will be talking about today. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the conference because the dates are coming up. They're right around the corner. And then if you can tell us, you guys are involved in a lot of writing activities, especially, you lead the freelance writers workshop and at Barnes & Noble. And then there's another conference coming up. You have the conferences twice a year in the spring and in the fall. So share all that information and then tell us, how did you get involved with that?
Well, it's a simple story. I, as a freelance writer, I started going to professional development conferences around the state and around the country. And I went to one in Ann Arbor, and it was held at a junior high school, one-day event. And I thought, this is a nice, close-to-home event, but it could be done so much better. And so I threw it together quickly. All in 1 year, I think 6 months from the conception to the conference date, 2008 in October. It all began with just that idea of, this could be done better in a one-day event. I started the writers group, got some interest from the writers of the community. Is this something you would want here in the Rochester area? And overwhelmingly, people said yes, and borrowed some money to get started with the website development and building and promotion, and maxed out my credit card for advertising, and it worked, and you were there.
Yes. And it was also, though, it was a success. I remember that first time event. I remember it was very organized, and there was a decent amount of people that showed up. And did you know at that time that you were going to continue and that you were going to double it, like have it twice a year?
Well, I made the mistake of calling it the first annual because I was so excited. I mean, when you have an inaugural event, it should be called an inaugural event. But I was so excited to have this be something that happens every year. I made that grammar mistake, even though it's a writers' conference, and said first annual. And sure enough, it was. We have one every fall, and that's our signature event. And, of course, we've got the spring conferences, and we've been running those for 6 years now. So we're 12 years for the fall conference and 6 years for the spring conference.
And I want to talk a little bit about your background. So you've published quite a bit, hundreds of articles. And so you've been in the writing scene for a very long time. What is your background, if you can tell us? And then, Sonya, you can also share, please, with us your background as well, because you're pretty involved in the conference. Yes.
I couldn't do the conference without Sonya anymore. She's a very important element to making everything happen. But I got started in journalism from a radio background. I was in radio broadcasting for 10 years, and I did everything from host to produce to co-host, both music and talk shows. And I started by doing a travel talk show called Travel and Adventure Radio, and it aired for 7 years on 2 different stations in Michigan, one of the longest running programs of its kind at the time. And it was so much fun, and I would go on all these trips and meet travel writers that inspired me to get involved with travel writing. And I started submitting freelance travel articles to magazines and newspapers, and it worked. And people read my articles, and in 2006 I was voted favorite columnist by a reader survey for Suburban Lifestyles, a local paper that's no longer being published as it was. And so I've continued with glossy magazines as well as international and trade publications.
Wow, that's quite an impressive work. I didn't even know all of this, because oftentimes when we meet, at the the freelance marketplace or whether the conference. So you're really in the background and you allow the other authors to share, and you've been very helpful, just helping them with advice and stuff. So sometimes we're not aware of how much you've accomplished in order to even create that kind of space for us.
Well, it's an amazing journey, and yeah, absolutely. I want to help people. The old saying, learn from the mistakes of others because you don't have time to make them all yourself. And so I do share the knowledge in hopes that I gain some wisdom from other people that have been in the business even longer or doing something different.
Great. So what about you, Sonya? What's your background? How did you get involved in all of this?
Well, my background started, I think I've always kind of known that I've wanted to be a writer. And in the early 2000s, I started writing for a company newsletter. I was working for Daimler Chrysler, and they had a company newsletter. So I wrote like a monthly column. It would usually be around like travel or events going on. Sometimes I'd interview people at the center. So that kind of led into some other things. I started doing some freelance articles for magazines like Michigan Sports Edge, some reporting for Rochester Media. There was a piece in the Oakland Press. And then I started blogging, and I started my blog a long time ago. Didn't really know what the focus was, but more recently I've got a little more direction with that. So,
Which is, because I know you focus on work that I really enjoy myself.
Thank you. I guess I would maybe call it creative nonfiction, or just kind of a sharing of different topics that are of interest to me, and also talking about my experiences with writing or making jewelry or the conferences that I'm involved with.
Mm-hmm. And are you also involved with freelance? I think that you do also attend the freelance writing group.
Yep.
That's at what? So what is? How did that start? I didn't know that started after the conference.
No, it actually started before the conference.
Okay.
I had attended, besides all the professional development and conferences around the world, I went to several writing groups locally trying to hone my craft and get better at it, because I came from that broadcast background into print journalism. And I found that all the writing groups were critique groups. They were how to help
That's
you
true.
do better and read your work aloud and share it. And that's all good stuff. There's lots and lots of dynamics, and you can learn a lot from that. But no one was talking about the business of writing. How do I get contracts? How do I find outlets? What should I expect from a publication? How do I contact an editor? What are my rights? How do I keep my rights? All of these interesting questions that none of the critiquing groups knew. So I started the Freelance Marketplace Writers Group, I know it's a long name, in hopes of getting other freelance journalists to come together and talk about what it takes to be a freelance writer. And from the very first meeting, I had poets, songwriters, novelists, short story, memoirist people showing up because they all wanted to know more about the business of writing. So it went from what I thought was going to be niche on freelance journalism to being all writing, and people that create and develop content for anywhere from a website to a novel.
Yeah, that group is different, I have to admit. I used to attend it more regularly, and as you know, I ended up meeting somebody. You brought a speaker one time, and he had his own paper, and I became a columnist. I met him there, and then I asked him if I had some story ideas, and he said, well, just email me, and that's
Hawk Francasa.
Hawk Francasa,
Yeah, the local newspaper guy, and
Yes.
he's deceased now, but
Yes.
his legacy of being an editor and a writer is still in the community.
Yes, yeah, and so that was how that experience is different. Is that when he came, that's what he was kind of introducing us to, is how to approach newspapers and magazines, and it was more like, it wasn't so much about us critiquing the works, but it's like, how do we go to the next step, which is really submissions and what to expect from all of that. So I have some pictures here, it seems like from the spring This is the upcoming conference?
Yeah, this is
the
our logo
focus?
for our upcoming event on March 30th. It's all about self-publishing. So our spring event is a focused, or the theme is more narrow when it comes to the spring event. So many people are interested in self-publishing, and this conference, March 30th, will give people a great insight of how to get started and how to continue if they're already self-published. And maybe they have a book idea and they're not sure if they should go the traditional route where they contact a publishing house or do it themselves. And there's so many opportunities and advancements in that field that it makes it really easy for someone to become a self-published or an indie author.
Well, and how do you pick the theme for the conference? And for instance, in this case, so you said that there's a lot of interest in that, but how do you guys make that decision based on
A lot of
response
times
that you have?
It's the feedback that we get from our fall conference, or just what's
The
topics
trend.
the trends, the topics. A lot of times at the freelance writers marketplace, people have a lot of questions, and so we try to base it on that and seeing what people want to hear about the most.
Yeah, exactly. It's two of the biggest conversations or topics that people have questions about is self-publishing and blogging and websites and social media. So it's kind of the newer stuff that's out there for people that may have been writing for years and they want to know how to get involved with the latest ideas of publishing. And so we did a conference on blogging and social media just for writers. It was a few years ago. And so this self-publishing one was just really easy. I mean, the idea was there already by patrons and people that attend.
And you said, so I have I think there's this is of the Rochester Writers Group. Actually, I'm going to just put that up there.
So
Oh my goodness. Yes, I've been in those situations where you can't find a seat because it's so full.
So yeah, we have a lot of people attend. Over the course of 12 years, the fewest people we've had were 2, and the largest groups are over 35, I believe, close to 40 people sometimes. And this is a good-sized group. The image that is up now showing about a dozen people, maybe 14 people in attendance, all different ages and backgrounds.
Including Roberta, who is she's the president of Detroit Working Writers. You know, she usually comes too, or she tries, yeah.
Yeah, so we have lots of members from other groups and other organizations that come. It's a large networking opportunity, and we're happy to have this at Barnes & Noble in Rochester Hills to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's really cool. I just wanted to, because I just saw that picture up there. But so now we'll go back to the conference.
Oh, sure.
And because you have some of the guests, that if you want to talk about what they're going to be presenting. And, well, first of all, let me find Sylvia. She's the keynote speaker.
Sylvia
I love
Hubbard,
Sylvia.
of Motown Writers Network. She is very well known in the community, hugely successful, self-published author.
Yep.
She knows everything when it comes to self-publishing and marketing and social media. So it was a very easy choice to ask Sylvia to be the keynote speaker.
She's wonderful. She's been at it for decades. Very
Yes,
committed to it.
dozens of books.
Yes. And let's see. So
And Lev Raffaella, a popular speaker in Michigan and around the world. He's spoken at international conferences all around the world in multiple languages. He's quite a diverse character, and people will come to the conference just to see him. And if you've never heard of him, you're going to be pleased at attending whatever he has to talk about, because he knows his stuff.
I've seen him speak. Yes, he is delightful to listen to and very helpful. It's
Absolutely, absolutely. And Mel Corrigan, she has a little different haircut these days, but she is working for a publishing house, a small indie publishing house. So she knows the editing and what it takes to become a self-published author. And she's going to talk a lot about the numbers, how to crunch the numbers, how to calculate your numbers, how to figure out your costs of being a self-published author. So what is it going to take to make this happen, both with money and in distribution and
the budget involved.
Yeah,
that is very important. And I think a lot of people, in their excitement, well, we're creative people, writers. So sometimes that area is a little bit neglected, and some people end up cutting certain funds from certain places, which are very necessary because the whole point is really to get a good quality book out there. So sometimes whether it's about hiring professionals, it's not that costly, but I think if you are aware ahead of time, then you can maybe plan more accordingly. So I think that's a very great topic for people to look at, because then they can just kind of understand and be prepared. It's a process, just like any business or any project, and it's a process. And if you have everything put in place, it will really help you move
Yeah, you got to have your
forward.
business plan.
Yes, and to make it a successful venture as well. Yeah.
Right. So besides authors, right, you think about self-publishing as being something that people that craft stories are mostly interested in. Then that's not necessarily true with self-publishing, because as an entrepreneur or business owner or an expert in a field, it's important to create something that you have, a product about your services, and that can be a book.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to have a literary background or be an author per se. You can be a business owner or entrepreneur that is going to create a product, which is a self-published book. It could be a how-to book. It could be about nonfiction. It could be the story of caregiving. We all have a book inside of us, which is a cliche term, but why not use that as a marketing tool to advance your career?
That's true, yes. And I think Colleen, yes.
So Colleen Gleason was instrumental in the idea of self-publishing. She has a fantastic workshop, Is Self-Publishing Right for You? And this came from a book that she collaborated on called The Naked Truth of Self-Publishing. And so you need to know what to expect, formatting and dealing with the different companies that are out there. And that's why we put the conference together, is because people have lots of questions, and it's actually quite easy, but you got to know where to go to get the answers.
Yeah, it helps when you're equipped with all of this. I myself, I did so much research to try to get it right, but at the time when I started, and this was in 2004, really the information that you were getting is like, you have to go and get a book on this, and once in a while you'll find maybe somebody that is. Actually, no, there was nobody that I found that gave a lecture. It was mostly that you would receive material, like written material about the process of how you get it done. Whereas if there were live people, it's so much easier that you go into a conference and get all your questions answered. And again, you can prepare so much better for this. So we're going to look at some of your past conferences. Is this for last year?
This is from fall of 2018, and we're in the brand new Founders Ballrooms at Oakland University, and we've been at Oakland University since 2010, and they have this great new space, big AV production screens, large rooms. One of the important things that I have at the conferences is that there's tables and chairs. So a lot of events will just have rows and rows of seats, and you have to have your laptop on your lap and your notepad on your lap. So this allows people lots of room to spread out. We're not crammed into a tiny room. You've got writing surfaces really close to the exits and the restrooms and the coffee, and we have all-day coffee. So these spaces are beautiful at Oakland University, and we're happy to be there.
And this is where you're having it this year.
Yeah, so the spring conference as well as the fall conference will, for the near future, always be at Oakland University in Rochester.
And so if you want to repeat, the spring conference is March 30, and then the one in the fall is October 19th. Is that
correct? So they're both Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
The spring event is traditionally April, so we're close. It's March 30th, and that's just really based on the schedule of the university. And then the fall conference is always in October, again, always on a Saturday. And we shoot for that third weekend typically, but it varies, again, based on the schedule that happens around universities.
And people, how can people register for this?
So all of the information is at rochesterwriters.com. So
Just-
all one word, rochesterwriters.com. And we're on all the social media channels, so you can find us on Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook and Twitter. And pick your favorite channel and follow us, and you get information about not only the two large events per year, but our smaller events and our writers group. And we haven't mentioned this, but Lev Raphael, one of the speakers for the spring event, is going to do a half-day workshop on May 11th coming up this year. And that is going to be a very narrowed focus on improving your writing. And you're going to improve your writing by coming to the workshop and writing in the workshop. And it's going to be a very small group, all in one room, half day, with just 20 people.
Where's that at?
That's also going to be at Oakland University.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to open registration March 30th at the spring event.
And everything, like you said, is available on your website,
Yes.
even including that information.
Yes.
Now, I think what I have noticed has been usually what you do in the fall conference. Don't you usually bring agents, or is that just sometimes something that you do sometimes?
So yeah, bringing agents, literary agents, not really appropriate for the spring conference because it's all about doing
Right.
it yourself.
Yeah.
But if you are going to go the route of traditional publishing, where you're going to contact the big publishing houses and pitch your idea, many of them you cannot go directly to. You have to use a literary agent. And so we've been bringing in literary agents for the last couple years, and that's going to be at the fall event, where people can book a time to sit down with a literary agent, tell them their book idea, maybe give them some samples of the first chapter, and the literary agent will be quite honest with them on what are their chances, what might they have to change, what word count are they looking for that particular genre, and who they might go after. And if the literary agent likes them, they're going to follow up with them, and perhaps contracts will be drawn and books will be published.
Yes, yes. And the whole process, too, because I had my literary agent through the, actually, Detroit Working Writers, when they had it at Oakland University. Well, it was a long time ago, like in the 1990s. But I met my literary agent through that, and it was such a learning experience, too. So just even sitting with them, and there's a lot to learn from just connecting with them, regardless of whether you end up getting signed on later or not. So now, I'm, given that you guys have both been not only as writers, but also have worked with so many writers, established and emerging, and like you said, your group is open to anybody who is interested to come in. What advice would you guys each one of you give to writers, especially emerging writers, or writers who have material but are afraid to submit? I had my previous guest was an author who was talking about that fear that writers have of submitting, and those are the ones that might be afraid to even come to your group because they feel like, well, we're not ready for the next step. So any advice that you would give writers in that position?
Well, I do have a tidbit that I tell everyone, and for fear of giving it all away in one little sentence here, it's really everything you need to know, and it's ends up being a metaphor for life. But you have to know the audience. Know your audience. So whether you're doing a TV show or radio program, writing a book, or even crafting a poem, you have to know who's going to be your audience, viewing it, reading it, listening to it, and give your editor what he or she is asking for. And that is who is paying you, who has assigned this to you or accepted this contract. If you say you're going to do this and they want that, then give it to them. So it's very simple. Know your audience and give the person who is paying you what they're asking for.
And I would have to agree with that, too. And sometimes the step, previous to that, is that people are afraid to even begin writing for fear of what others might think. And I think it's really important to just start letting it flow and writing anything. You don't have to share it with anybody. If you get stuck for a word, just put a blank and keep going. And sometimes just turning on that flow allows you to move forward.
So, given what you guys are saying, so there's there needs to be a respect, I guess, for the business of writing. Also the recognition that there is two sides to a writing career. Part of it creatively, that you have to actually write something good, and write and edit and re-edit, and that is one part, which is more the creative process. Even though even in that there's I don't know if it's the business part, but there's a practical part where you do have to revise, you do have to have it make sense, and not just, maybe some people try so hard to be too poetic or too complicated in their writing. But then there's the other side, and maybe the business aspect a little bit, where the submission, the contracts involved, having a relationship with the editor, and understanding what is needed from that publication. Like you said, know your audience. And so sometimes writers, they think that if their piece is good, that they just expect, like, they're just going to throw it out, just throw it wherever, there's no target. And so that creates a certain type of disappointment. And then from that on, it's harder for them to continue submitting. Again, I think coming to groups that can kind of guide you is very important, because if you had that thought and then you listen to somebody hear what you said, Michael, then they're going to think, oh, well, this is why I'm getting these rejections, and that's okay. That also, I'm doing something wrong, and all I got to do is just kind of change my strategy. So being in groups, that's what happens. And what I found in your group is that oftentimes it's the people sitting there, because a lot of them are they're published, and different. Some are self-published, some are traditional. They have a lot of good advice to give. I've noticed that in the group.
They do. It's an awesome dynamic of people from all different backgrounds and different writing careers that can bring their skills and the mistakes that they've made and what they've learned along the way to the table, and they share that, and people ask questions, and it is a business. There is protocol. There is methods to get published. And what's nice about the spring conference is that it's self-publishing. It's do-it-yourself. So you can take all that advice and throw it out the window and do it yourself if you want. If you have, so that's the beauty of self-publishing.
Yes.
And another aspect to that, too, is the writing contest. Sometimes that helps people to learn to work within a certain parameter, or it makes them think about, like you've said before.
Yeah, so Rochester Writers offers a writing contest too, and there's lots and lots out there. And what's nice about contests is that it gives you that instant feedback, and it gives you an assignment. So it's kind of an element of the business world. So you follow the word count, you follow the theme, you do what is in the contest guidelines. It's almost like an assignment with an editor, and then you get that judged, and you may or may not win. But the point is that it gives you that practice to follow the steps to get published.
Yes, exactly. Well, I was gonna say we have a few minutes and ask you another question, but we actually only have 1 minute. But because this has gone. You have so much information because of you guys' background and everything. So we literally just have 1 minute, but you've given so much great advice. Any last words that you guys want to share?
Well, I think I just leave it with where they can go for more information. And Sonya, you have your own website. Do you want to mention that?
Sure. It's just my name. It's SonyaJulie.com.
SonyaJulie.com. And for us, it's RochesterWriters.com. And there's contact forms, and people can ask questions, and again, follow us on.
Yes. And did you mention, just real quickly, when you meet at Rochester?
We meet the third Tuesday of the month at 7:30 p.m. every month except December.
Okay. Yes. So anybody that wants to connect with the group, you can just go to the Rochester Barnes & Noble's site, and then even if you want even to learn more, of course, go to the conference. That's really, if you're a serious writer, I really recommend that. Otherwise, if you just want to at least meet them or just check out what's going on, go to the group at the Barnes & Noble's in Rochester. Well, thank you guys. I loved having you. I hope to have you guys again, and I will be seeing you at the Rochester Writers Conference on March 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.